Hi, my name is Selogadi Mampane. I'm a performer. I've been performing for about 20 years. I'm in the academy. I'm an activist. And I want to talk about conflict, connections and voices, hopefully respond to the last questions and also respond to what Kwezi said. So I want to start off first, possibly by slandering another South African artist, but it's okay, because we did exchange words in person, so this is not something that I've not done. But I specifically don't want to talk about the artist, but about the kinds of works that are created. Because I think that what's going on is there's a tightness in women's chests to speak about various kinds of things. And with that tightness, you're caught between a whole system that is designed to consistently walk all over you, undermine you, tell you are stupid, you don't know anything. And then on the other side, there are your fellow sisters, brothers, people who you want to protect and safeguard, but you also want to be able to critique and say to them what you think about what they're doing. And in that context, a lot can be bubbled up. And we struggle, I think, to find ways to talk about or express what we are going through. I want to give you context first, and then I want to carry on talking. Do you know Larford Newton, South African theatre maker? Do you remember her play Tshabalala, the Third Testament?
Yes.
For those of you who do not know, I'll read the Google book summary. It does talk about rape. Outside a South African town, a silent woman, Ruth, goes through her self-imposed ritsals, a child's crib strapped to her back. An observer, Simon, who has loved Ruth since childhood, tells her story. Interesting. Tshabalala was inspired by the horrifying rape in 2001 of a 9-month-old child. The child, Tshabalala, gave her name to Larford Newton's award-winning play. Of course, the child cannot give their name, so the name was appropriated to advance this theatre maker's work. Though it is also based on 20,000 true stories, the number of child rapes estimated to occur in South Africa each year. Having premiered in Amsterdam in June 2003, Tshabalala opened at the Gate Theatre London in September 2004. So this was a play about something that happened to a black woman and her child, told as designed by the producer, director, writer who is not a black woman, through the words of a black man. Whew. When I watched this play and I read it, my chest became very tight. And during the play, we see her performing her rituals, silent throughout the show. She says nothing, and she is there constantly, trying to purify herself from what she's been through, and having someone speak on her behalf constantly. And at the end of the play, we get this kind of final gasp from her, where she goes, Tshabalala, and that's all we get. Nothing from her, nothing about her world. She's this kind of silent, perpetual victim. She's just a victim. She can't speak. She can't articulate. She's just constantly traumatized. She can just barely do. All she can do is sit there running through the trauma in her mind. And so I did research on this play, and I discovered that when Larford went to this town, the mother did not want to speak to her. The child cannot speak. So from who does the story come? It doesn't come from the mother. It can't come from the baby, the child. It comes from the mind of this director who decided it is best for black women to remain silent and for others to tell our stories for us. And this is not an uncommon framework, as you know, and it is not uncommon in our country as well to have these sorts of experiences where we are apparently unable to speak or articulate or say anything for ourselves, and someone else needs to say it for us. And so because of that, we have a need to kind of protect when other black women speak, even if they're saying things we don't think are beneficial to a lot of us, a few of us. But we'd rather stay silent because at least she's saying something. And this is dangerous at the same time. It's dangerous to let ourselves run amok like the same people who lord their positions and power over us. To become that which one despises I can just say whatever, say whatever, say whatever, and no one should ever say anything to me. How dare you? Support black women always. And so we can use an example in this. Phumzile van Dam, from the DA. So we think of the story of her where she got into that altercation at VA Waterfront. Recently, people were speaking about it again. And I'm less concerned with the whole story of what has happened, but more concerned with our responses to it. It's very important for us to be able to say, even if and when, because we are people, other black people, other black women fall and stumble or do things that we think are hurting us ideologically, it's important that when they are attacked, we don't feed into this kind of desire to go, you deserved it. You deserved it. Because at the end of the day, we are the only ones defending ourselves. It's very important to be clear that that kind of idea of radically loving one another is to respect each other's human dignity at a basic level without saying everything that comes out of your mouth I think is great or everything you do is wonderful. You can actually hold these two things together. I think what you're doing is wrong. Don't you dare lay your hands on her. These two things can function together, and that is important. So what we need is conflict resolution amongst each other. And to do that, you need conflict resolution within yourself as well. If you don't find a way to admit to yourself that maybe I do think that my hair is ugly, maybe I do think that I'd look better if I was born lighter skinned, if you don't begin to assess and be honest with yourself about the ways you view yourself, it'd be very hard to sincerely approach another and say, I have a problem with what you are doing and saying, and not turn it into a gang pile-on, personal attack, into a kind of witch hunt. So we have to think about what is my psychology. A lot of the times when we don't sort out what we are going through, and art being a primary way to do that, we end up behaving in strange kinds of ways and drawing other people around us into our own therapy, such that instead of being able to say, I can take leadership here, and we can all work and we can all express, everyone must become involved in my own play of sorting out my issues and my trauma without being sincere about it. Then everyone's running around, instead of participating, is actually running around trying to heal me without them knowing. And that is fine if we state it. It is not fine when people unknowingly are dragged into that. So there needs to be honesty with ourselves about how we feel. And one way you can do that is art. So let me finish off. I've been chewing on something now for 5 years. I've been struggling to get it out. In between that, I've done lots of different kinds of theatre work. A lot of the time, we try to get everything out at once. Everything must just come out of me right now. The whole thing. Instead of taking bits and pieces and wondering and pondering on them and figuring out, where can I show this? Where can I show that? There is the work that feeds you. There is the work that you do because it is good work, because others need to see it and hear it. And that work doesn't pay as much or doesn't really pay, but it's good for you, it's good for your soul, it's good for your community, for your people, for everyone else around you. So make those kinds of distinctions, but you must start with yourself and admit to yourself, I actually maybe am not okay, I need to be okay. And I need to find a way to express what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing. And it is a privilege to make art and to be able to do that. It is a privilege to involve others in that experience. Always, whether you're making big bucks or small bucks. Art is really the space of being able to say a lot with very little words. But that doesn't mean that we should have our tongues cut out and should remain silent figures to be looked at, studied, and prodded. Don't look at yourself like that. You must learn to love yourself. And make work that also moves towards that direction. Don't just traumatize each other again. Let's not do that. Just make work re-traumatizing each other, showing each other being abused. Let's try to make work that takes us somewhere, as Kwesi said, somewhere out. Let us have an escape route or a hatch or something, and not remain stuck like they want us to remain stuck. Yes. Thank you. Just two quick answers. I think that obviously we live in a society where there's violence, so we're going to have stories that have violence in them. That isn't the problem. When I was in Namibia, I was doing a play and I enacted a scene of violence, and I triggered one of the women watching it, and she had a panic attack full on during the show. And this is what I mean. I'm telling a story to the people who experience that violence. I should tell it differently because they know that violence already. They don't need a rundown of it. They've experienced it. So I must think, who am I telling the story to? If I'm telling the story to survivors, survivors know. So I need to find a way to engage with them that doesn't leave them, stuck in that place again. And so maybe I need to start somewhere different, end somewhere different. Break it up in a different kind of way. So there's lots of ways to tell stories using different kinds of styles. And you can change your show depending on who's watching it. The idea that presenting the show to a totally white audience in Europe should be done the same to a totally black audience in Soshanguve is almost absurd, because these are two different audiences. So there should be almost different emphasis in our minds of what am I trying to get across here. And then the last thing, sorry, there was a question, and then someone said something about, Lara Foot. Okay, so I will be clear, right? Even in the academy, Kimberly Crenshaw, she's a big USA academic, and she has this word called intersectionality. I've read lots of academic papers. I've read very few, if any, white professors who understand her work. There are some things you don't understand. I don't understand poor Afrikaners women experiences. So can I tell a play about? Probably not, because I don't come from there. And if I did, I would spend a good amount of time there trying to understand what they are going through. So the idea that because I'm a great theatre maker and I make amazing art and I have all of these skills, that I can tell these people's stories is nonsense. There's lots of stories, we just don't have the info to tell. And I think we need to start telling each other, my friend, you don't know how to tell this story, and that's fine. Tell a different story. Tell a story about all those white people surrounding that township. What about them? It's black people's story. I'm going to tell your own story and stop telling other people's stories. So this is important. Learn to tell your own stories in your own context, right? Even Brett Bailey, who thinks he's an honorary white Zulu man, he's not an honorary black man. I don't care how long he spent somewhere there in KZN. He's not. So these are not really his stories to tell. He's a tourist at the end of the day. He will always be a tourist, and that's life. Sometimes you're a tourist in certain spaces, and you should learn to accept that. Why do people think we don't want to hear interesting stories about white South Africans? We can, and we can listen with a critical ear about the interaction between these different groups. But it's really important that people just even stop trying to tell other people's stories. We're tired of it. This is in the 1600s. People can tell their own stories. And I think that you should always think about that. You're a great director, you're a great artist, but what do you know about that place? That's all.